Judges 12, verse 6. This is a way they're given a secret password to find out who's who. And if you can't pronounce a word right, then they know that you're not the tribe you claim to be. This is a good thing. It's like if the North and the South were to have a war, and somebody from the North came down as a spy, we could just say bagel.
I knew that was
and when they said bagel, we would know that they're not a Yankee, or they're a Yankee. They're not true born. So this is what's going on here. Judges 12, verse 6. Then said they unto him, Say now Shibboleth. And he said Sibboleth, for he could not frame to pronounce it right. Then they took him and slew him at the passage of Jordan, and there fell at that time of Ephraim 42,000. They are doing some work.
One word.
Yeah, one word. It would have paid for them to learn the language of their neighbors. Judges 12, verse 6 is that tells you something about human nature. Even though they're all of the same nation, they're all Israel, they're all different. And Christians are the same way. We may be all saved, but we're all going to have certain things we differ on. And that's going to happen. Just like this thing we're going through with the 3.5 years or 7 years. That's no reason to break fellowship with somebody. That's somebody studying and working and trying to come up with something. I've got more respect for somebody who comes up with a wrong answer by studying and using Bible than I do somebody who just goes along with what I've always been taught, what they say. That means nothing. Find something. So that's going to happen. You're going to have differences and variations. That's okay. It doesn't mean one person is a lower class than the other. That's life. Get over it. Here's a blonde woman was speeding down the road in her little red sports car and was pulled over by a woman police officer who was also a blonde. The cop asked to see the blonde driver's license. She dug through her purse and was getting agitated. What does it look like? She finally asked the policewoman. The policewoman replied, It's square and it has your picture on it. The driver finally found a square mirror in her purse, looked at it, handed it to the policewoman. Here it is, she said. The blonde officer looked at the mirror, then handed it back, saying, Okay, you can go. I didn't realize you were a cop. Something gets lost in translation, and that's what happens. Even amongst the same family. Here, even though they're Israelites, they lose something in translation, even though they think they're saying the same word. You know what? Because they hadn't been fellowshipping together. That made a big difference. Had they had a custom of coming together and fellowshipping, they would have learned each other's language. They would have learned how to say Sibboleth or Shibboleth, or how you say it and how I say it, what this means. And that's part of what happens with Christians. Christians segregate. And when you segregate, then you only see it according to the scope that you learn. And that scope is going to be just as narrow as you get it. That doesn't mean God won't show you something. You've just slowed the process way down. Because to find something, you've got to make so many errors. He's got to correct so much bad teaching from yourself. The more people you get together, the more other voices can say, that doesn't sound right. Let me show you something over here. And that's a good lesson to learn from their bad experience. Judges 13:25. This will be talking about Samson as he comes in on the scene. It says, And the Spirit of the Lord began to move him at times in the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. God really wanted to use what's his name? Samson. Can't say it tonight. Samson. You see God wanting to use him from before he's born. He goes and announces it to his mom. Says, this is the way you raise him. He's going to be a Nazirite. He's going to do all this. I want to use him. And he begins using him. That's a good thing. We can be in the same boat. God wants to use each and every one of us. But you know what? he rejected it. He didn't yield to it many times, and he turned into a disaster. Now, he did deliver Israel, but that was because God decided he was going to. And he set him up and used him. Even though he became a bad example, he still used him. However, it would have been a whole different story had he submitted himself to God, done what the Holy Spirit was leading him to do, and the same with us. Judges 17, verse 6. Judges 17, verse 6. This is typical of the book of Judges. They get victory over something, and then before they turn around, they're back under bondage. And here's why. Judges 17, 6. In those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes. There wasn't any king. However, guess what? There hadn't been a king before that either. Joshua wasn't a king. Moses wasn't a king, although he may have been for a season. It says he was called king in Jeshurun. So they were used to not following a king. However, the real king that mattered was Jesus. You find over there in 1 Samuel that he says, hey, I was their king, and they've rejected me. So they had a king, and truly they didn't have a human king, but they didn't have God as their king either. And when you don't have God as your king, you can only do what they did. Do right in your own eyes. And that's the problem, because we all have a different idea of what right is. Right is whatever benefits me. And that's the way they were living. This will be the key verse in the chat or in the book. This also comes up as the last verse in the book. That's a good bookmark for our book. That'll be in Judges 18:1 and Judges 19:1, Judges 21:25, all through the book. The Lord is no longer king for Israel as far as in their eyes. Self-will is the rule of the day. That's what they want to do, whatever is right for them. Man always takes the positive view of his own sins, of his own mistakes and errors. Man wants to say, well, that one's not a big deal, but you make the same one and it's a big deal. Somebody else makes it, it's a big deal. If I do it, it's something different. And when you've got a whole nation of people doing that, you've got anarchy from the inside. No wonder it's going to fall apart. In Judges 18:1, he says, in those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribes of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in. For unto that day all their inheritance had not fallen unto them among the tribes of Israel. Of course not. God was the one in charge of doling out the inheritance. Even though he had said, this is the lot of land I'm going to give you, they still had to conquer it. And they can't conquer anything. God has to strengthen them to do it. In 19:1, same thing. And it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite sojourning in the side of the mountain of Ephraim, who took him a concubine out of that place, Bethlehem, Judah, that place. This guy is a bad character, and we're going to find out some more about him. But notice, no king turns to concubine. Okay? It's just a road to degradation. You better have God as your king, or you have no morality. It's a constant changing morality. Judges 17:10. This is a sad story. Judges 17 will give you the formation of the Roman Catholic Church. And Micah said unto him, dwell thou with me, and be unto me a father and a priest. Okay, so this Levi has come through the territory. This guy says, hey, why don't you just stay at my place, and you can be my priest, and I'll treat you like a father. We know any religion set up like that? Yeah, the Catholics. And I will give thee 10 shekels of silver by the year, and a suit of apparel, and thy victuals. So the Levite went in. He said, that sounds like a good idea. So the Roman Catholics do the same thing. They want to be called a father and they want to dress like mama, and they want to be a priest, and they want you to bring all your shekels of silver to them and have some long robes. In Mark 1, verse 6, God takes this serious, and here's why. Oh, I'm sorry. I told you Mark. It's Malachi. You could, we're going to be in Matthew in a minute. That's not too far. Malachi and Matthew is where we're going to be. Malachi 1:6. In Malachi 1:6, God's talking here. He says, "A son honoreth his father, and a servant his master." God says this, "If I be a father, where is mine honor? And if I be a master, where's my fear? Saith the Lord of hosts unto you, O priests that despise my name." And you say, "Wherein have we despised thy name?" He said, "You're taking my name. I'm the father, not you." No priest should be claiming to be a father. God says, "That's my name. Don't you be claiming it." It says it again in Matthew 23:9. Matthew 23:9. It says, "And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father, which is in heaven." Okay, now, he's not talking about a son and a father, that type of relationship. Although, how many people call their nearest kinsperson a father? I've always called him Dad.
I mean, people refer to, "That's my father," or "That's my dad," but not, it's more formal.
Right. Yeah, I mean, other than that. But now he's saying here, this is a reverential title. This is a title of, like the priests were doing. "Father, I will guide you." And he's not his father. This the popular thing that teenagers are doing nowadays. Building a family where there is no family. I'm going to be your brother, and we're going to be sisters, and you're going to be my dad, and it's all make-believe. That's what's going on here. I'm not saying that's wrong, although it is, in my opinion, but I'm saying that in this sense, a spiritual sense, it is very wrong. It is very wrong. Now, the only time it happens biblically is Paul. Paul is an exception to the rule. Paul says, "Timothy is my son in the faith." Okay, that's a little different situation. Paul's an exception to the rule because Paul replaces, I got to be careful how I say this because it's going to sound, Paul is the Gentile to, or the apostle to the Gentiles. So as far as we're concerned, the doctrine we follow is from Paul. He's given a doctrine direct from Jesus Christ to preach to this church age that didn't have to be. We're following Paul as he follows Christ over and above what Jesus was teaching when he was walking on the earth. Now that sounds wild, but it's not. What Jesus was teaching when he was on the earth was a nation of Israel, "Come to me, I'm your Messiah, and I'm going to make you the head of the world." It was physical. What we're looking for is spiritual. He revealed that to Paul. Judges 19, verse 2. Judges 19:2. This is going to get into a subject that you'll need to understand, because there's a bunch of idiots in the Old Testament who had multiple wives and multiple concubines. So the question is, what's the difference? How do you know when it's a wife and when it's a concubine? The standard teaching, and you'll hear it even today, is this: I don't need anything from the government saying I'm married. You'll hear that line. I'm married in God's eyes. Oh, really? Did he tell you that? That's what they'll do. And they'll say, flesh joining flesh is marriage. Okay. It is and it isn't. However, I say to those people, okay, it can be, but tell me this, is it a wife or is it a concubine? Because both of those existed. God recognized both of those. How do you know which one it is? Maybe you just got a concubine and you're saying it's a wife. So you need to know what the difference is. Judges 19:2 says, and his concubine played the whore against him and went away from him unto her father's house in Bethlehem, Judah, and was there 4 whole months. Okay, so a priest and a concubine. That's bad news from the beginning. A priest shouldn't have a concubine. And if she's going to go play the whore, he sure shouldn't go after her. Okay, so let's see some issues with this guy. Genesis 38:24. Judges 38:24. Genesis 20. Y'all need to read this for me. Genesis 38:24. It says, and it came to pass, about 3 months after that, it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot. And also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, bring her forth and let her be burnt. Okay. That's what should happen to someone playing the whore, according to Old Testament law. So if this priest is going after his concubine to win her back, which is what the story is going to tell you, he's wrong right there in not following the law. But if it was just in one place, maybe we could say, okay, it's just because Judah was hardcore. But let's keep going. Leviticus 21:6. Leviticus 21:6. Of course, Leviticus, we're talking about the law and especially priests, the line of the tribe of Levi. Leviticus 21:6. He says, they shall be holy unto their God, and not profane the name of their God. For the offerings of the Lord made by fire and bread of their God they do offer. Therefore they shall be holy. They shall not take a wife that is a whore, nor profane. Neither shall they take a woman put away from her husband, for he is holy unto God. So this Levite has no grounds for what he's doing. It's clearly set forth if you're a Levite. Now maybe if you're the tribe of Dan, we might give you a little bit of wiggle room. But a Levite, there's no way he should be doing this. Chapter 21, verse 6. He says, they shall be holy unto their God, and not profane the name of their God. For the offerings of the Lord made by fire and the bread of their God they do offer. Therefore they shall be holy. He's saying, if you're going to give something publicly for God, don't be messing around with something that's unholy. That's very convicting for us. If we're going to open our mouth for God, if we're going to speak on his behalf, if we're going to even praise him, don't be fooling with something that's unholy. He doesn't accept it. Deuteronomy 22. Deuteronomy 22, verse 21. Deuteronomy 22:21. Then they shall bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of the city shall stone her with stones that she die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel to play the whore in her father's house. So shalt thou put evil away from among you. If a man be found lying with a woman married to an husband, then they shall both of them die. Both, the man that lay with the woman and the woman, so thou put away evil from Israel. That's why the woman caught in adultery is an issue. They come to Jesus and they say, we found this woman, we caught her in the very act. Now, we know what the law says. What are you going to do about it? Here's what the law said to do about it. If you found her in the act, there was two of them there. How come you didn't bring them both? The law says both of them are to be put to death. So there's something fishy going on there. Deuteronomy... no, we already covered that verse. I got duplicates in here. Judges chapter 19, verse 3. Judges 19:3. So he's going after her. She's been called a concubine. Now we're going to see she's called a wife. Judges 19:3. And her husband arose and went after her to speak friendly unto her, and to bring her again, having his servant with him, and a couple of asses. And she brought him unto her father's house. And when the father of the damsel saw him, she rejoiced to meet him. Okay, he's a smooth talker. You got to watch out for that. That's the way a woman is won is by words. The way a man is won is by sight. So, be careful what you see, be careful what you hear. If you are a man, be careful what you see. You know, beauty's only skin deep. Ugly goes clear to the bone. That skin will wear off. It replaces every 7 years. It does. You get a new skin every 7 years. But here's the thing. This guy could win her back because he could speak smooth to her. He knew how to talk. That's all through the Bible. It's the smooth talkers who win over women. How did Eve get fooled? Somebody was talking to her, saying just the right things. Don't be listening to that. In Judges 19:3 is a sales pitch. He's speaking friendly. He's a smooth talker. Genesis 34, verse 3. Genesis 34:3. We find another smooth talker. This is Dinah. It says, and his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel, and spake kindly unto the damsel. He could talk her into something. In Proverbs 30, verse 19. Proverbs 30, verse 19. Solomon says, there's some things that you do best just not to even try to figure out. The way of an eagle in the air. Hey, you can't understand all that. How's a bird as big as an eagle fly? And sometimes it flaps its wings, but you don't see it flap its wings very often. But yet it's flying. You look around at these other birds, and all they do is flap, flap, flap. I can understand them flying. You know, they're working at it. Not an eagle. He says, I don't understand that. The way of a serpent upon a rock. He ain't got any legs. How's he get any traction? How's he go? I don't know. How can he go up a cliff? I don't know. They do it, though. The way of a ship in the midst of a sea. The way of a man with a maid. Well, that one we can understand. It's smooth words. However, another man will walk by and hear it and say, that guy's pulling her leg. But she's buying right in. Buying right in. That's why he says over there, and let's turn to it, 1 Corinthians 11, I think. 2 Corinthians 11. Second Corinthians 11, verse 3. Must be something about that 11. Oh, 11 means information in the Bible. And this is good because it goes with what we're talking about. talking, you get talking for information. And that's what's going on here, is a man will talk to a woman, and the woman will get info and think that she knows him. And she don't. She knows whatever he wanted her to know. God chooses to reveal himself through one means. It's words. Why? Because we're supposed to be his bride. So he's going to talk to you. We should be won by his words. But most people aren't. They want to listen to the devil's words. All right, 2 Corinthians 11, verse 3. But I fear, lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. A lot of smooth talkers religiously are out there. Now, flip back a book, 1 Corinthians 11. Verse 10. He's talking about the difference between a man and a woman and God and Christ and the church and all this. He's giving you a hierarchy. Verse 10, he says, for this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the angels. That is, the devil got to Eve, and she's talking to him, and he's subtle, and she was fooled by it. And so it's the words that are going to fool a person. For us, it should be words that'll separate us. His word. If you get enough of his word in you, you won't be fooled by these phony words that are out there, because there's a lot of them. Judges 20, verse 36. Judges 20, verse 36. He says, so the children of Benjamin saw that they were smitten, for the men of Israel gave place to the Benjamites, because they trusted unto the liers in wait, which they had set in Gibeah. What they're doing here is they're setting an ambush. You find ambush is a good way to do battle. You find it used all through the Bible. An ambush is a good battle strategy. You can make the enemy think that they've beaten you, and you get them to chase after you, and then lo and behold, you've got somebody sitting out in the woods waiting on them. That's what's going on here. But notice a word in that. He says, the men of Israel gave place. What does that mean? It means they acted like they were smitten. We understand that from the context. They acted like they gave place. I'm giving up, you got me. When really they had somebody sitting there waiting to ambush them. In Romans 12, verse 19, Romans 12, verse 19. He says, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves. Don't fight. But rather give place unto wrath. Okay, give place doesn't mean make room. It means set an ambush. For it is written, vengeance is mine. Who's the one that's going to rise up and take care of business? There's the ambush right there. God's waiting to take vengeance. I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. In Ephesians 4:27, we see the same word used again. Now he's saying, here's a time not to try to set an ambush. There's certain things you can set an ambush for. When they went up and conquered Ai, they set an ambush to do it. There's some cities you better not try setting an ambush to. You'll be dead before they start killing, they won't stop. Some things, that's a good strategy, use an ambush for. Here's a place not to use an ambush. Ephesians 4:27, neither give place to the devil. He's too powerful a foe for you to try to set an ambush for. Are we trying to fool him? He's too powerful for you to mess with. You see Michael do it in the book of Jude. He says, I'm not going to fight with you. The Lord rebuke you. Hey, I give up. The charismatics are bad about this, acting like they can call out the devil and do battle with. He says right here, don't give place. Don't be trying to set an ambush for him. That's a fight you don't want to mess with. That one you just turn over to God and back out of the fight. But setting an ambush is a good thing to do. The next book we're in is Ruth. Man, thought I turned that thing off. I'm start calling me Jan.
You just do that.
Mine is. Ruth, the book of Ruth. There's a couple of books in the Bible that I have difficulty with. I mean, they're good books. They're great. I just don't get a big charge out of them. That sounds awful, but there's not, I don't know. The book of Ruth is one of them. The book of Ruth is the story of, it's kind of a add-on to what's going on in Judges. The book of Ruth transpires during the same time as the Judges. And it fits back in that time period when Israel is not ruled by a king, they're not ruled by Joshua, they're ruled by judges or whoever's taking charge. In this book you'll find several characters. Elimelech, that means my God is king. Okay? It's good to know these names and what they mean. And when you read in the meaning of the name. See if it doesn't tell you something. The name Naomi means pleasantness. The name Malion means sickly. The name Chilion means pining. These years are in Moab. It's a picture of what Israel is doing. Look at Lamentations chapter 1. You'll see Israel in this story. Ruth is a perfect picture of Israel out of the will of God, Israel in a country that is not their own, and they're having nothing but sorrow. So let's find a book that's called Sorrow, Lamentations. Lamentations chapter 1, verse 1. He says, how does the city sit solitary that was full of people? How has she become as a widow? She that was great among the nations, and prince among the provinces. How has she become tributary? She weepeth sore in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers she hath none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They are become her enemies. Judah is gone into captivity because of affliction, and because of great servitude. She dwelleth among the heathen. She findeth no rest. All her persecutors overtake her between the stairs. The ways of Zion do mourn, because none cometh to the solemn feast. All her gates are desolate. Her priests sigh. Her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. This is that's a good counterpart for what you're going to read in the book of Ruth. Verse 5. Her adversaries are the chief of her enemies. Her adversaries are the chief. Her enemies prosper. For the Lord hath afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions. Her children are gone into captivity before the enemy. And from the daughter of Zion all her beauty is departed. Her princes are become like harts that find no pasture. They are gone without strength before the pursuer. This is Ruth, the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth is a sad book, most of it. Now there's a happy ending to it, like a good story should have a happy ending. But it doesn't start out as a happy ending. It starts out as famine. It starts out as somebody who's going to find an answer when God does not seem to have answered. She flees to a foreign country. She flees to Moab. Moab and Ammon are bad news. God says, don't mess with them. I'm never going to give you any of their territory. Matter of fact, he says, I'm going to have war with them all their days. So if you're going to go hang out with them, just count on getting some more from God, because that's what he's promised to do. That's what she does. 7 times reference is made to the country of Moab in this book. After the death of God my king, Elimelech, we have the forbidden marriage of Naomi's sons. Naomi has sons and they marry daughters that are of Moab. That should not be. They shouldn't be marrying foreigners. God doesn't like that. He never condoned that. In Deuteronomy 7:3, he says, "Neither shalt thou make marriages with them, thy daughters. Thou shalt not give unto his sons, nor his daughter shalt thou take to thy sons." It's clear. This pictures Israel mixing with the corrupt world. Or it also pictures us, Christians, mixing with the world that we know is corrupt. Both other Christians that are corrupt and just out and out heathen that are corrupt. Don't mix with them. You're going to get just what you find in this book. In Isaiah 47:9, Isaiah 47:9, he says, "But these 2 things shall come to thee in a moment, in a day, the loss of children and widowhood. They shall come upon thee in their perfection, for the multitude of thy sorceries, and for the great abundance of thine enchantments." She gets exactly the fulfillment of this. She loses her children. What she ends up with are 2 daughters that aren't hers. They're foreigners. They're heathens. Israel's idolatrous condition is portrayed by Gomer and Rahab, of course, in the book of, Hosea. But Naomi pictures the long, drawn-out period dwelling in the wilderness, wandering among the nations, until only a tiny, bitter remnant remains. That's going to be the conclusion of Israel. That's the way they end up in the tribulation. They've been intermingled in the world, and many of them are going to find or try to find solace with the Antichrist's kingdom, and they're going to become food for the plate. That's what's going to happen to them. He says 2/3 of them are going to be destroyed. There's just going to be a tiny remnant that's left. It's quite a cruel thing to not preach the Bible as it's written. Here's why. I'll show you one little thing. This thing saying that the tribulation is 3.5 years, you know what that does? That, off the bat, says only 1/3 of Israel can be saved. Because he clearly says only 1/3 is going to make it. 2/3 are going to be killed. So you've said right off the bat only 1/3 is going to be saved. You better just stick with what the Bible says. Let it be a whole week. And then let it have a rapture in the middle of it, like it says in chapter 14. And let anybody who will get in. And then let them have a second chance, like the Bible does. And any who survive, that 1/3 will get to go in and endure to the end. But that's what happens with people. In the remnant of Israel that return after the tribulation, in Zechariah chapter 13:9. Zechariah 13:9. This is the last half of the tribulation. And it's what this book, Ruth, is going to picture. Only a remnant being saved. She went down into Moab with a house full. She came back alone. Zechariah 13:9. He says, "I will bring the 1/3 part through the fire and will refine them as silver is refined, and I will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God." I said 1/3. It's 2/3 that make it through. He's going to... No, it's only 1/3. That's right. He's only bringing 1/3 through. So 2/3 of them are destroyed. That's bad news if you want to claim to be a Jew. I don't think I want to make that claim. That's bad stuff. The homecoming of Ruth. Not Ruth, it's Naomi. Naomi, when she comes home, she's just a widow. She has to own her own guilt. And she is guilty. She shouldn't have gone to Moab. She left the house of bread, Bethlehem. That's what it means. She left there because she said there's not any bread. That tells us something. Don't leave what God says is good regardless of how bad it seems. You know how they say the grass is always greener on the other side? Well, there's some truth to that. Just munch on what he gives you. Don't worry about finding somebody else's plate. Because it's not long before she realizes, hey, it's bad here too. Maybe I ought to go back. In a minute, we're going to see her lie about why she left. Ruth 1:21. Ruth 1:21. Naomi thinks, after having seen what she's had to go through, she starts seeing things from God's perspective. Ruth 1:21. I went out full. Well, if you were full, why did you leave? Wouldn't you stay there if you had everything you needed? You had a full belly? No. She left because she thought there was a famine. She says, now that I'm looking back, what I thought was a famine, I was eating fabulous. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call you me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? It's better to have a little bit with God's blessing than to go out and try to seek abundance from the devil. Because the devil's abundance is the biggest trick you've ever seen. You'll look back on it just like she did and say, if I had only known, I was really full. I had plenty to eat. What I've got now, I can see God's hand of punishment.
She wasn't referring to her family?
Do what?
She wasn't referring to her family. She went out full of children and husband and came back?
She did both. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll see that it's the house of bread, and she leaves because of a famine.
Okay.
So she thinks that, a lot of it has to do with bread, but a lot of it is the family. Her house went from 5 to 1. She's the only one left. She had a husband. She had 2 sons. She got 2 daughter-in-laws. She comes back, or God starts whittling away at it. She starts losing food. One son dies, another son dies, her husband dies. One of the daughter-in-laws says, I'm going to stay here. The other one says, I'll go with you. So what started out as 5, or it became 5, quickly went down to 2. Naomi and Ruth.
I have a question. Who made the decision to leave, her or her husband?
I don't know.
Because if her husband decided to leave, she would have went with him.
Well, she said right there, I went out full.
Mm-hmm.
So then she told them we're leaving.
You gotta watch them women.
You gotta watch them. That's right. They start making the rules. What do you expect?
You notice I didn't go. I stayed here.
Yeah, she could have. She could have stayed, though. She could have said, I'm sure. Here's one thing to know. A woman always has a major influence on the man. Period.
Even back then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, even back then. A woman has a major influence on the man. Now, let's see God's hand in this. Had she been innocent and the husband was guilty, would God have given her this as punishment? I doubt it. I doubt it. Now, God does end up blessing. The story's not over. We're just seeing the sad part of it right now. It's going to have a very happy ending at the end, but we ain't at the end yet. We'll get there. The Moabites couldn't enter the congregation of the Lord until the 10th generation. We've seen that before. A bastard or a Moabite couldn't enter in. But they came at the time of the start of barley harvest. This is the time of the wave offering. You'll find that in Leviticus 23:10. This is about the resurrection. That's what it pictures. So the remnant comes home, and through Naomi's fall, salvation was given to Ruth. who, hey, she's not supposed to even be in the congregation. But Ruth gets salvation from a Jew's fall. Does that sound familiar? Romans chapter 11. The Jews rejected Jesus Christ. And then lo and behold, us Gentiles get in. Even though we were the heathens. We're not supposed to be in. We're supposed to be pilgrims and strangers. But we get in because of the Jews' fall. In, let's find it here, Romans 11:5, he says, even so then this at this present time also there remaineth according to the election of grace, talking about the Jews. Go back to Romans 1 verse 3. Romans 1:3, he says, concerning his Son, this is, of course, God, concerning his Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord, which was made of the seed of David according to the flesh, Jew, and declared to be the Son of God with power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by the resurrection from the dead. Okay, what do we got any part of that? We ain't Jew. How do we get in? Chapter 11, verse 11. Chapter 11, verse 11. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? God forbid. Yeah, Naomi did have a little trouble there. She went to the place she wasn't supposed to go. She did some things she wasn't supposed to do. Okay, did she stumble so she would fall and be destroyed forever? No, she got to come back. She got to be in the best family there. It ended up good for her, just as it will end up good for Israel. But I'm not going to say it's easy all the way. But let's find our spot in that, the Gentile. But rather through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. That's where we get in. We're the Ruth. We're the heathen that shouldn't be, and we get the supreme position. The time of harvest is when Boaz meets her. His field is being reaped. The reapers, the word reapers is used 7 times in this. They're working with a steward who is overseeing them, and you'll find all the pictures and types in that with Matthew, the book of Matthew. I'm not going to give them all to you.
Angels, and that ties in with the angels, the
Yep,
reaper,
yep,
and all
yep,
that.
yep. Ruth 2:5. Then said Boaz unto his servants that was set over the reapers, whose damsel is this? You find that in Matthew. He says, we're looking down there at the harvest, and I see some good seeds, and did you sow those bad ones in there? There's some reapers watching, because they got jobs to do. He's going to have them doing some things. And it's basically a Jewish connotation. It's not for us Gentiles. However, it's good to note those doctrinal things as you go through there and see how God's going to use them. The field, of course, is the world, according to Matthew 13. Ruth is the bride. She gets the chosen place of preeminence. Ruth 2:5. Then said Boaz unto his servant that was set over the reapers, whose damsel is this? He's taking note of a Gentile. Why in the world would he notice a Gentile? He shouldn't be looking at a Gentile. He shouldn't be worrying about a Moab woman of Moab. Guess what? Jesus Christ shouldn't care anything about us.
That's right.
We're not of his lineage, but he does. He's watching us. You know where he found us? In the field, in the world. And he took note of us. If that doesn't make you shout, I don't know what will. John chapter 4, verse 3. This is Jesus' opinion. Too bad we don't think a little more like this. John 4, verse 3 says, say not ye, there are 4 months, then cometh the harvest. Okay, we know what the harvest is. We covered that already. It's the end of the world. It says, why say 4 months, then the world's going to end. We saw that in Matthew. We're in John 4, verse 35. John 4, verse 35. It says, "Say ye not, there are 4 months, then cometh the harvest." So if we do all the types and the pictures we've been taught from Jesus, the harvest is the end of the world. He's saying, don't say it's just 4 months and this thing's all going to be over. Let's sit back and have fun. He says, here's what you should be saying. "Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, the world, for they are white, all ready to harvest." He's always looking at the field. We should be too. We should be. We should be seeing souls that need salvation. That's what Jesus is interested in. He's interested in the nobodies. He's interested in the Gentiles. He's interested in the heathen. The people we're not naturally interested in. Too bad we're not, but we should be. Matthew 9, verse 7. I don't know why I have that verse. That's not the right verse. Look at Luke 10, verse 2. Yeah, I don't know what that verse is. Somebody went to their house. Said, I'm done. It's dinner time. Luke 10, verse 2. "Therefore said he unto them, the harvest truly is great." He had to tell them this. They weren't smart enough to see it. We aren't either. There's a harvest out there and we ain't even looking. He had to tell them, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. "Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he would send forth laborers into his harvest." That tells you something. You got to pray about it. You're not going to see the harvest through natural eyes. The disciples didn't. If the disciples didn't, don't you dare think we are. Because we ain't made it to the disciple level. Okay, well, they didn't see it. He says, here's what you can do about it. Pray that the Lord of the harvest will send laborers into his harvest. So pray and ask him to open your eyes to the harvest. Okay, God? This day is just about to start. You said the harvest is full, and I'm blind. I can't see anything. Slap me in the face with some harvest today so I know it's there. And that's what you got to do. This is Paul. Paul has that same idea when he's working for the Lord. Romans chapter 9, verse 2. I don't know why in the world he would say this. I sure wouldn't. Romans 9, verse 2. "That I have great heaviness and continual sorrow in my heart, for I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh." Wow. That's how much care and concern he had with the lost. Not the saved, with the lost. He wanted to see them get saved that bad. I ain't to that level, and I don't know that I want to be. I don't want to trade places with the lost. No, sir. That's right. But we could get a little bit of that. A little dose of that wouldn't hurt us. A little bit of that sorrow would be good for us. Ruth works diligently every day in the harvest. Through Ruth, hope was revived in Naomi. She caught on to what Ruth was doing. She says, hey, she's getting excited about this thing. It must be exciting. We should the same. We're designed, according to Romans chapter 11, to provoke Israel to jealousy. Look around at most Christians today. They don't have enough going between them and God to provoke Israel to jealousy. We're going to be gone soon. When the tribulation starts, it's not going to last very long. They're going to have known church-age Christians. There's something in there that should provoke them to jealousy. There's something in there that should say, man, I wish I'd got a hold of what they had. There was something about that Jesus that really helped them. And it provokes them to open the Bible and read. Something about your life should provoke, after you're gone, Israel to jealousy. That's what happened in the book of Ruth. Psalms 126, verse 5. Psalms 126, verse 5. He says, "They that sow in tears shall reap in joy." That's not with a needle and thread. He that goeth forth and weeping, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. There's a promise to sorrowing and seeking for the harvest. That's what he says. He says, I'll let you have some of the harvest. Now, he may not give you a whole bunch of it. He didn't say how much you're going to bring, your sheaves. You may only get 2. But that's okay. 2 is better than none. 2 is something. Find somebody you can weep for to bring some sheaves home. Moses warns Israel that they would lose their rest. The dreadful night of Revelation chapter 9, when the gospel work has been completed. It'll be a 7-year night when the chosen bride is sheltered with her beloved. That's exactly what the story of Ruth is. Ruth goes on, Naomi's by herself all night. One day we're going to be gone. Naomi, the Jew, is going to be left alone. But we're going out. The book of Ruth is a picture of us. Ruth, the Gentile. We're the Gentiles. We're the church. Naomi's the Jew. Okay, she's going to get in, but boy, there's going to be some trouble she goes through. So will Israel. It's going to be tough for them. And you can see the verses there. I'm not going to go through them. We've gone long enough. All right, next week we'll pick it up. Pick it up there. This is all intro to the book of Ruth.